Hello, my name is Dennis, and welcome to my Trailer Park White Trash Mobile Home Kitchen. I really do live in a mobile home, in a trailer park, and this is my kitchen. Many years ago, I want to say it was about 25 years ago, some friends of mine took me out to dinner at my favorite seafood restaurant in Santa Barbara, California. It's the one that Douglas Adams describes in his book, So Long and Thanks for All the Fish, as having been built, he thought, inside of an old warehouse. It actually wasn't a warehouse. It had been a laundry that serviced the hotels in the Santa Barbara area before being bought and converted into a seafood restaurant. I had something that was called, if I remember correctly, Seafood Fettuccine, and it was absolutely wonderful. It was one of the best dishes I've ever tasted. And I asked the waitress if the chef would be willing to give me the recipe. I never asked for a recipe in a restaurant. Well, the chef came over to the table, and I told him, what makes this so good to me is that the last bite, when I'm full, is just as delicious as the first bite was when I came in hungry. And I asked him for the recipe, and he said, I can tell you how to make enough to feed 40 people. And I said, well, just give me the ingredients. I can figure out the proportions. And he did. And so that is how I came up with my recipe for seafood fettuccine. It's a little bit different. He used bay scallops along with shrimp. I don't use bay scallops. I use all shrimp. I also use a thickener, which I don't think he used. So let me get into my ingredients that I use for making my seafood fettuccine. I have here 2 tablespoons of butter. I'm going to be using about a tablespoon of olive oil. 1 to 2 cloves of garlic, depending upon how large they are. 1 pound of large shrimp, deveined. I'm going to cut these in half. I'm going to show you something special I'm going to do with these. 1 cup of heavy cream. 2 tablespoons of dry sherry. You can use dry white wine, dry marsala, vermouth, whatever you like. I have dry sherry here. 1/4 teaspoon of ground oregano, not the flakes, the dried leaves, but the actual powder. It looks like a powder. So that's dry ground oregano. 2 teaspoons of rice flour. I like rice flour. You can get this in the Oriental section of the grocery store. If you can't find rice flour, you can use regular white flour, all-purpose flour. Then I have 1/8 teaspoon of white pepper, salt if needed. I'm going to be using Romano cheese. This has salt in it, so I'm going to hold on the salt. I have 2 tablespoons of Romano cheese. You can use Parmesan cheese if you like. And then I have some fresh pasta that I made the night before. This is about 11-12 ounces of fresh pasta. I'm going to be using this to make my fettuccine. If you don't want to make your own fresh pasta, you can buy the fettuccine in the store. You're going to be using about 1 pound. So those are the ingredients I use for my seafood fettuccine. These shrimp are already deveined. If you're not familiar with deveining shrimp, along the back here, and you would just cut this open with your knife all the way down to the tail, you usually find a large dark, they call it a vein. It's not actually a vein, it's the intestine of the shrimp, and it's usually filled with some kind of dark muck. And so you want to take that out. That's how to devein shrimp. These shrimp actually smell pretty good. I had a problem. I don't know whether you can see that or not. Can you see the dark muck in there? This is a shrimp that's supposedly been deveined. But there it is. Good. I wanted you to see that. There's that dark, mucky intestine. That has to be pulled out to clean the shrimp. And as I was saying, these shrimp actually smell pretty sweet, pretty good. I went to the warehouse store to buy shrimp, and I always check the shrimp very closely when I look at it. And the guy put about 1 pound in the bag and went over to the cash register, over to the scale rather. There wasn't quite 1 pound in the bag, and he went over to the, there's another one, went over to the bin to get some more shrimp. And I could smell the shrimp. They smelled just awful. And I told the guy, can I change my mind on these? And then I went over to the grocery store where they had shrimp on sale for $5.99 a pound. The warehouse store was asking
$9.99. So I ended up buying these shrimp at the grocery store, and they smell good. They smell fresh. I have this theory, this pet theory about the warehouse store, that because they buy their shrimp at the lowest price they can get it for, the distributors probably don't sell them their first quality shrimp. They save that for the restaurants and the stores that pay a higher price. So what you end up with is shrimp that isn't all that good. So I'm very cautious about buying shrimp in the warehouse store. Even though these are deveined, I'm finding a lot of the shrimp here have the vein inside. So look at that one. That one's really obvious. So let me finish these up, and then I'll get into the next step. Just finishing up here. Another pet peeve of mine are the restaurants that leave this tail shell on. That's fine if you're going to be doing a shrimp for, say, deep fat frying. You're going to batter it and deep fat fry it like a tempura, and you want a little handle by means of which to hold the shrimp. But if you have a shrimp dinner, like a pasta dish, and you're eating it with your fork, I don't want to have to pick through my food with my fingers to get these tail shells off. So leave them on if you're planning to serve them in a way that you need something to hold on to with your fingers. Otherwise, just get rid of them. Okay, so all my shrimp are done. Save these shells if you want, by the way. I put them in a Ziploc bag and mark them and date them. And then you can use these for stock. I put them in the freezer, and if I'm going to be making a fish stock or even a vegetable stock and I want to add a little more flavor to it, you can put the shrimp shells in that. I'm just going to pop these in the freezer. One thing that I like to do that's a little bit different is I like to cut my shrimp in half down the middle. So I hold it with my fingers with a very sharp knife, cut right down through the shrimp and cut them in half. And the reason why I do this is when I cook them, they just seem to curl up into nice tighter spirals, which it makes it more bite-sized. It holds a little bit more of the sauce. This is, I think, important when you're working with really big shrimp. These aren't all that large that I could probably leave them uncut in half, but I do like to cut them in half. They also cook a little bit more quickly. I've got my water boiling here. I'm going to put my pasta in there. I've got a bowl and a ladle sitting on the side because when this pasta goes in, I'm going to get a foam on the surface once this comes back up to the boil rather. And that will be caused by the flour on the surface of the pasta washing off. And I want to ladle off that thick foam because I'm going to use that as pasta water in my finished dish. In the meantime, while I'm doing that, I don't know how well you can see this, but I'm going to pour my cream, get some on the stove. My white pepper. That's my rice flour. And my oregano in a jar. Put the lid on it. And then shake this up. Rather than having to mix it up in a bowl, I just put it in a jar. And that way, I've got it ready to put on my shrimp when I get to that point. My pasta is just now coming up to the boil. I'm going to boil this only for about 1 minute. I'm going to undercook it, then run it into a colander in the sink and run cold water over it because I'm going to finish the cooking by putting it into the skillet with the shrimp and the cream just before I serve it. And there you can see that foam starting to come up. I want to capture some of this. This is nice and starchy. This makes great pasta water. For my finished dish. If I were working in a restaurant and cooking pasta all day, the pasta water would get real starchy. You just keep adding water to it. That means this has been cooking for a minute. Turn the heat off, run this into the sink, and then get some cold water onto it. Okay, I'm going to start my shrimp here. So I want to get my butter into that dish, that pan rather. And then just glug some olive oil in there, about a tablespoon. This is extra virgin olive oil. While that's coming up to the heat, I'm going to crush my garlic in there. As soon as that butter stops foaming, that'll be warm enough. Okay. And this is going to cook very quickly because this shrimp has been cut in half. Here goes that's my dry sherry. I just want to get this to where the shrimp is just about cooked. And I don't know how well you can see that, but this curls up almost like corkscrew pasta when you cut it in half. So now, before it goes too much further, I'm going to pour my cream mixture in there. Get the last of this out. It's so good I hate to part with it. Bring my heat back up to high because I want to bring this to a boil, and that'll thicken this. There's rice flour in there. The reason why I like rice flour is it doesn't add any flavor. And if you're going to store this in the refrigerator at any time, the rice flour won't, it's much less likely to separate the liquid out over time. You can use arrowroot if you'd like. Again, you can use flour. I would cook the flour a little bit if you're going to be using flour. That's just starting to thicken. So next thing I do is get my pasta in there. And then with my tongs, start stirring this around. Get that all nicely coated. Try not to make a mess. Oh, that is looking so good already. And the last step is to get my cheese in there and just lightly stir that in. You don't want to stir that too much because it'll melt and get stringy. That's good. Now I have one last finishing step to do. This is my pasta water. This is just going to give it a bit of a shine, a little more creaminess. Oh gosh, that looks so wonderful. Okay, look at that. Ah, my mouth is watering, my stomach is growling. This looks so good. So my final step now is to plate this and see how it tastes. Okay, I'm going to put some of this on my plate. Some shrimp on top. Oh, that looks so good. I love seafood fettuccine. There it is. You can garnish that with a little bit of extra cheese if you want, and then eat. Okay, I've got to see how my fettuccine is going to taste here. Oh, this looks good. It smells good. See, it's that oregano in the sauce that I think just makes it so wonderful. Perfect. The sauce has a wonderful savory flavor. You could, if you wanted to, top it with more cheese, but I think this is fine. The shrimp is cooked to perfection. You have to be very careful with shrimp. You don't want to overcook it because it'll become rubbery. So, excuse me, I got to go have my lunch. For a printable PDF copy of this recipe with step-by-step photographs, visit the White Trash Cooking website and look on the home page or in the recipe archive.